Good morning, YouTube. Baubles on a lot here. Sunday, the 23rd of October. Just getting ready for Outsiders and First Dog on the Moon.
Time now for Outsiders. I'm Barry Cassidy, and you're not. Outsiders today are Sarah Lamaquan, the columnist, editor-in-chief, Stellar Mag AU. Parnell Palmer-Gillis, communications consultant, freelance writer, often in The Spectator. Jane Gilmore, freelance writer as well. Morning all.
Good morning.
A weather report, please, from Sydney, you two.
Just phoning up that the plane trees are back. We've been too busy with the fruit platters and the juices that you provided for us.
Poor Australian taxpayer struggling to provide the blandishments that are in green room. Jay, we can report that the Melbourne weather is reverting to type.
Yes, it's standard Melbourne.
Well, Sydney has, however, been big in the news. New South Wales Liberal Party having a conflab yesterday, which there were two rival proposals for reforming the party, increasing its democratisation, one from the PM and the New South Wales Premier, one from the member for Warringah. Guess which one won? Yeah, this guy, here he is. Come on, Malcolm, you're there.
I am determined, as you are, to modernise the Liberal Party, to build a bigger and better Liberal Party, where a broader membership will be attracted to our cause. The best way for us to prepare for the next election is by getting on with the job of governing.
A big thing, Parnell, but like everything else that the government, the Liberal Party, have tried to do in this past week, it's been obscured by the presence of Tony Abbott, member for Warringah, who also put up his own proposal.
Well, this goes to the core of the leadership spill, of course. This is what caused the spill in favour of Turnbull and what could continue to cause eruptions in the Liberal Party if it isn't resolved. So in a way, this kicking the can down the road by the moderate faction is a way of saying, okay, we need to accept that the Conservative side of the party feels this way, but also put our own parameters around the matter and try and own it for ourselves. So they're trying to take back control of the party on a number of different levels.
Is it kicking the can down the road, Sarah, when it's carried unanimously as that vote backing Turnbull and Baird was?
Well, what was interesting, you alluded to this, Jonathan, it comes back to this eternal struggle that we've seen playing out in the headlines this week between Turnbull and Abbott, and it is technically a victory for Malcolm Turnbull and for the moderates, but Tony Abbott, in keeping with the spirit of the week, was very quick to claim this as a victory for him and said, I think it was a moral win for the reformers, because the state executive only came up with the idea of a people's convention because of the pressure that the Democrat reform movement's been brought to bear, unquote. So he's been less than gracious, shall we say, and I think, again, this is just another example of whatever technically happens or whatever emails do or do not happen to come to light, Tony Abbott is determined to interpret things his way, and if that's at odds at how the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, interprets them, well then, so be it.
It's not going to go away, is it, Jane Gilmore? I mean, this is now the character of our politics, the leader always under dispute from the recently deposed.
And I think it was also hilarious, the actual things that they were voting on, which was to do nothing now or to do nothing later. And that vote became about who's the more popular, who's got the more power. I thought it was the perfect metaphor for what's going on in politics at the moment. And I didn't find it in the least bit surprising that Abbott, refusing, as he always does, to have anything to do with reality, tried to come out and tell everybody this is how things actually are. I won, despite the fact that I lost. I snatched this, and now look at what a wonderful winner I am, and expects everybody to believe him.
This is politics.
This is politics, and he really thinks that kind of stuff, rhetoric, works, and then gets surprised when everybody looks at him and goes, oh, hell no. Stay away from that.
There's a problem, though, isn't there, Parnell? Apart from the obvious thing between Turnbull and Abbott, the Liberal Party, with membership of around the 10,000 mark, it really needs to do something to have people reinvest.
it is in a grievous state. And it comes down a lot to what they were discussing over at this conference. I mean, many of Abbott's supporters, of course, don't feel that this was a victory at all, despite his words publicly, and have been quite angry about the fact that that the membership won't be increased and it won't be opened up to people further. How this could we can only think that on the moderate side there might be a consideration that if you were to suddenly throw it open to a wider membership, to anybody being able to be involved, that it would swing conservative, because the moderates have done a poor job communicating to people more broadly. So it's likely that the Conservative wing would suddenly increase. And
it's guesswork, though, isn't it? I mean, that's the Conservative wing's assumption. But
yes, as always, but the moderate wing has been quite inwardly focused, which is, again, part of the problem that's under discussion here.
What do you make of that, Sarah? They're starting to call the Abbott wing the sort of the Trumpish Conservatives of the Liberal Party, and could it get that sort of grassroots enthusiasm? Could it start to drive change from below, as it were?
Well, I think it's pivotal that it does, and I think that's why Turnbull is optimistic, whatever Tony Abbott says, because his words yesterday were to modernise the Liberal Party, and it's such a critical word, and it definitely plays obviously to the moderates, because I never really heard anyone say they want to modernise a party by appealing to the more conservative Tea Party elements, as it were. I think what we see with the Republican and the Trump side is that they almost had to have their Trump moment, if you like, and then, sorry, not to derail this conversation.
In order to save this party, we had to destroy it.
I believe so. I've always subscribed to that. I mean, it became apparent probably about a year ago that Trump was going to secure the nomination, and I've always been fairly confident, without wanting to be smug or complacent about it, that he won't win the general election. And I do think that you will see someone that has a serious chance of winning in 2020 take over, and that the party will rebalance. Now, here in Australia, it's hard to predict a similar moment, because you could say they had their Abbott moment, but as we've just touched upon, that Abbott moment hasn't come to an end yet. And I think this is the eternal struggle. Again, goes back to what you were saying, Jonathan, when you're talking to Jane about, we see this continually playing on. It's really been since 2010 now. This has been the mood in federal politics in this country, where, and obviously it can all be traced, I believe, to the knifing of Kevin Rudd.
Well, the difference, though, with that situation and Jane Kevin's return and so forth, I mean, Tony lacks one thing that Kevin had, and that is tremendous public appeal.
Well, this is also talking about a couple of things. Firstly, it's saying that the battles that are going on inside the parties is about leadership, and I don't think it is. I think it's about what's happening actually inside the party. The fact that the Liberal Party is trying to represent far-right religious conservatives and progressive moderates in the same party and make policy between that all of those people can agree on and claim to be a single party is frankly ludicrous.
And yet it's something that John Howard managed. Maybe it's a thing that can be better.
It's been polarised a lot more recently, I think, with the polarisation of a lot of politics. But also, just to go back to the point that we were talking about before, there's 10,000 people in the Liberal Party. There's, 28 million in Australia? So this is hardly representative or something that most Australians are interested in or engaged in or feel that is relevant to them. So for most of us to look at what's going on in small battles inside tiny little political parties, it's completely irrelevant, and I think it adds to the disengagement of the general populace.
Well, and for most of us too, watching the sort of stuff that happened in Parliament this week has that similar sense of disengagement. Let's recap, shall we, for those who came in late. It was an extraordinary day on Thursday in question time. Now, first we had Bill Shorten.
According to former Prime Minister Abbott, the Minister for Immigration and the Minister for Justice made a deal to trade guns for votes without the authority of the then Prime Minister. What steps has the Prime Minister taken to determine whether what the former Prime Minister said was true, or whether the Minister for Immigration or the Minister for Justice are telling the truth instead, that the Prime Minister's office was in fact advised?
Now, Tony Abbott had been running hard on the line that he had done no deal with David Leyonhjelm. David Leyonhjelm had an email which suggested that he might have done. It was at this point that Malcolm Turnbull drew a line in the sand.
I have made inquiries of my ministers, and I can say to the House that as a result of those inquiries, I am satisfied that the Minister for Justice acted in the full knowledge of the Prime Minister's office at that time.
And the Prime Minister at that time was Tony Abbott, who was not best pleased.
In question time today, various Labor members, led by the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, put it to this Parliament that I had somehow connived at a deal with Senator Leyonhjelm to weaken Australia's tough gold standard gun control laws. This is absolutely and utterly false.
Sarah, is Tony Abbott lying? Or was Malcolm Turnbull right to slap him down? I mean, it was an extraordinary moment to have that sort of a whack in the full public glare of Parliament.
Look, absolutely extraordinary moment, and such an own goal for the coalition this week, in a week where they really should have had their best week in the House, probably since the election. Because,
a week in which they passed the ABCC legislation, they passed the plebiscite legislation, they passed the backpacker legislation, they passed appropriation bills.
They should have felt that they were on pretty solid home ground, obviously for their base. So-called sort of union bashing, union measures have played very well, and as we've seen, all of the oxygen was automatically redirected to this tussle, to this constant battle to, I suppose, with Abbott. What was driving him presumably was to preserve or reset his legacy. And I think what we saw with Malcolm Turnbull was a moment where he just thought, look, enough is enough. And I think he did the right thing. I don't actually think he had any choice.
Well, I think
two of his ministers were dragged into it.
And they clearly felt aggrieved by this. I mean, Jane,
absolutely.
You get the sense that Malcolm Turnbull will just burst if this doesn't go away. I mean, the frustration must be extraordinary.
Well, the point is that it's not going away, and it hasn't gone away since he took over the leadership. The fact that he can't make it go away, I think, is the source of the frustration. The fact that he has no control over this, that he doesn't really lead the party. He leads a certain section of the party, and Tony Abbott is still essentially leading another section of the party, and they're still fighting it out in public. And he must know how sick of this we all are. So really, and you can see it in question time. The whole of the Labor's just sitting back with gleeful smiles on their faces. They don't have to do anything other than knock bullocks it up really badly.
Mind you, if we think we have problems with legitimacy of elected government, we've got nothing on these people in the US.
I would like to promise and pledge to all of my voters and supporters and to all of the people of the United States that I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win.
Parnell, I've got my pitchfork, I've got my torch. I'm ready for November 9.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Look, first of all, I think we have to remember one thing. This has happened in American politics before, 16 years ago in 2000, when the Gore-Bush result was disputed. So let's not put this entirely into the
Gore
camp
got
of the
behind
far
the president subsequently, I think you will find.
Well, Trump is still a thing by himself. But look, there is also something much scarier at work here, which I think is worth sort of worrying about, not just for the States, but for the whole of the world at the moment. And that is that Trump has sort of tuned into a lack of trust in the media and a lack of trust in institutions, which a lot of people are beginning to feel. They feel that they don't have a voice. And you know what? If Trump loses, and he probably will, what he is preparing for is to have these people come out and say, well, we've felt for a long time that the world is rigged against us, that the media is against us. So in any case, we had no chance of winning this, but we've finally gotten to say this, and now we are going to continue to be heard.
We can go back to our comment threads and blogs, perhaps.
Well, it's a bigger discussion how that came about anyway.
Well, that's true. I mean, Jane, if Donald Trump is the answer to the grievance must be a substantial one.
I don't think he's so much the answer as the flailing id of America, but I don't think the problem is just that people don't think they're being heard, because they are. I think more now than in any time in human history, we have the ability to be heard, to express our opinions, and to have them passed on to other people. I think it's more a frustration with an inability to, with a sense of helplessness, an inability to make change, that there's nothing we can do.
Here we go on the upload limit. Back soon with a new movie. Ciao.